Puspita, are you able to hear me now? It looks like you might have resolved your issue with sound. If you can let me know in the chat box whether or not you can hear me now. I'm about to turn the microphone and video over to Katrina.
Okay, bear with me just a moment. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Katrina So. I'm an application scientist here at CID Bioscience. I wanted to spend some time to introduce you to the new CI-110 plant canopy analyzer. With its increased ergonomic fit and upgraded self-leveling wide-angle lens, the CI-100 will allow the user to easily determine a number of important canopy measurements. Okay, here's the instrument itself. There's a nice armrest built in, a tablet that is firmly attached, allowing one-handed use, and as mentioned, the self-leveling lens, and 24 PAR sensors are included in the arm of the instrument. The instrument directly measures gap fraction analysis, PAR, or photosynthetically active radiation, sun flex, and also the location and orientation of the instrument. The CI-110 software The CI-110 software easily allows for the calculation of leaf area index, or LAI, via both gap fraction analysis as well as through PAR analysis. The instrument itself is quite simple to use. Let me see if I can move you closer. Okay. So you turn it on with the power button right here. You can navigate easily through the menus. You can use the up and down arrows to simply scroll through the active window that you're on. You can use the right arrow to enter a menu and the left arrow to exit the menu. Within this instrument, there are two different menus. There's the main menu that includes both the file name prefix that the user can set, a data folder where all of your measurements are stored. Oops. Let's see. Okay. There's also the option to export data. That's going to export all of the measurements you've collected on this instrument into a CSV file. There's the network option for you to detect a network available for wireless data sharing, and an advanced menu in which there are a handful of options, including camera alignment if you're using atypical alignment settings. The default is to be centered, but you can adjust that accordingly, as well as sensor calibration and compass calibration, which is not really expected for the user to need to calibrate this instrument upon arrival, but they are there if you need to do some troubleshooting. This is the data file that you can easily scroll between different measurements that you have taken. Let's see if I can adjust my light. Okay, sorry about that. So this is the data file that you can easily scroll up and down to see the different measurements that you have taken. And you can easily review the different measurements that you've taken by clicking that right arrow to view this data screen that shows you both calculated PAR averages, sunflex, and PAR LAI, as well as the gap fraction LAI, canopy density, and leaf angle. After you've captured an image, you can adjust settings by clicking that right arrow. Give me just a moment. Okay. And there's a number of different settings that you can adjust in this menu. Again, by pressing the right arrow to select any given menu. You can adjust after an image has already been captured. You can correct for brightness, contrast, as well as apply different filters, such as red filters, blue filters, and green filters. For the gap fraction analysis, you can adjust the thresholding. You can use OTSU, entropy crossover, or manually select that threshold. You can adjust the resolution of the photo that you took or can take, as well as adjust the zenith and azimuthal divisions of those photos. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and show you now how you actually take an image. It's really quite simple. There's a trigger located on the underside of the tablet. You simply hold that trigger down, and as you're holding it, you have a live image of what the camera is viewing, and you can adjust the exposure as you've got to hold that trigger down. You can select use the up and down arrows to adjust the exposure so that you can take an accurate image. Okay, and then when you're ready to capture that image, you simply release the trigger. And the screen following is going to go ahead and calculate all of those metrics that you want, as discussed before, including the gap fraction LAI, PAR averages, etc., etc. So taking images is quite simple using this instrument. And again, to get the data off, you simply use the left arrow to navigate back to the main menu. And there's an option, I don't know if you can see it there, called Export Data. And that's what creates a CSV file for you to obtain that data off of this instrument. Okay, so that is the number of features, a very ergonomic fit, very user-friendly interface. And I will go ahead and open it up to questions at this time. You can either unmute your speaker and ask me a question, or you can go ahead and type it into the chat box.
Are there any questions at this time? I'm unmuting people if you'd like to use a microphone, or you're welcome to use the chat box in the left. You can access the chat box with the little icon on the lower left-hand corner of your screen.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, we had some questions. In the documentation, it said that there was a neutral density filter, but we haven't seen them in the box or in the package, and I don't know what exactly that would be used for.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of that question, but were you talking about the density filters?
Yeah, the neutral density filters.
Okay. To my understanding, we were testing the different filters to see which one would give you a cleaner, crisper image. And there should have been 2 filters, am I correct, Susie, that were included in that shipment?
A 0.5 OD and a 2 OD.
A 0.5 and a 2 OD. That should have been included. We are doing testing currently to narrow down which filter presumably functions better. You shouldn't really need to, they should give you fairly even results. If you noticed that you had some issues taking, with some of your measurements, you might try the alternative filter, but it should not be necessary. If you do wish to, there should be already a filter inside, correct?
Yes.
There should be already one of the filters installed in the camera itself, and you should have been shipped the second filter. So
those are in small little baggies that typically are put in with the instrument manual in the packaging of the instrument.
yeah, my associate just showed me it's really simple to change the filter. You just remove the lens and can change the filter accordingly. But like I said, you may not really notice much of a difference between those filters. We've used both, and we're still trying to narrow down if there even is any realistic difference between those filters.
We have another question.
Okay.
Just did some testing just before and found that when it's very sunny, it gets a big sun flare, and then it's not accurately measuring canopy versus sky. And I was wondering how we'd get around that sort of stuff.
So when it was very sunny, it was not accurately measuring that?
No.
Okay, have you adjusted or played with any of the filters?
I had a little play with the filters, but I didn't get to a good resolution.
Okay, so I have a couple suggestions in regards to adjusting for different light conditions outside. My first suggestion would actually be when you're measuring, when you're about to take a measurement and you hold the trigger down, the instrument itself tries to select an appropriate level of exposure for you to capture the best image to give you the most accurate LAI, but it is not always the best exposure to do so. The instrument tries, but sometimes doesn't select the right exposure. So while as you're holding the trigger down, you can use the up and down arrow to adjust the exposure, and that really makes a very big difference in how well the instrument seems to be able to differentiate sky and leaf. Let me show you an example in here. Okay, I'm going to try and put this really close so you can see. Let me slide you forward here. Okay, I don't know if you can see this image well, but it was fairly sunny when I captured this image, and this was using the automatic exposure. And you can't quite tell without being there in person, but there was a lot of leaves up there in that tree that were not being detected with this picture given its exposure. So I adjusted that exposure, as I mentioned before, while you're holding down the trigger and using the up and down arrow. And you can see how many more leaves I was able to capture by changing just simply that exposure using the up and down arrow.
Makes a big difference.
Yep, so that's That's the automatic setting, which sometimes is quite accurate, but sometimes off. And that's with me manually adjusting the exposure.
You're slightly overexposing it there to get more resolution.
Right. Yeah, and as I mentioned, you can certainly play around with which exposure is going to give you the most accurate setting. It's very simple to shoot several images in a row to kind of compare and contrast. The other option that I would say to play with is the different filters. So you are able to filter red, blue, and green light. The red light, is often used when, I believe, sorry, let me just dig around in the manual here for a moment. Okay, so the red filter is most often used when it is bright and sunny and the sky conditions are very even. And the blue filter is used most often when the sky conditions are uneven, so patchy clouds and such. And you can simply adjust the filters. Okay, so if you go into an image, so here's your data folder, and you can scroll through these different images. You can press the right arrow to go into that image, right arrow again to open the measurement adjustment menu. In image, you can adjust the red filters, blue filters, and green filters. I haven't found much literature out there regarding green filter usage, but blue filters and red filters are regularly used in different research for those very reasons. So I would suggest while you're out there, if you're having issues with getting accurate images, to adjust the exposure. While you're taking it, again, you hold the trigger down and use the up and down arrow, or secondarily, you can adjust the red, blue, and green filter light to see how that affects your calculations as well after the image has been captured.
That's really helpful.
Would tweaking any of those threshold values you were talking about for you?
Yep. So again, you can adjust this after the image has been captured. So that's a really useful tool, right? That you don't have to lock yourself into a particular threshold. You can play around with those threshold settings after the image has been captured. And you do that in the same menu. So, let's see. Oh, that's really bright all of a sudden. Okay. Gap fraction, LAI. So you just go into that menu there. There's the thresholds menu. And yes, like if you wanted to apply OTSU, you just right click and it's going to adjust your image accordingly.
So is that the thresholds which determine whether it sees it as sky versus canopy, essentially?
Yes.
Yeah. And would a physical polarized filter help at all with sunflex and whatnot?
A polarized filter.
We heard mention that there were, in addition to the neutral density filters, there was maybe polarized? No, okay. No, we didn't hear that. I was making that up.
Perhaps that's something to investigate.
Okay, maybe somebody else has got some questions.
Yeah, sorry for holding it.
Pardon me, hold on just one moment. I did not see it.
In the chat box.
Oh, let's see.
She asked if it's water.
Ah, okay. All right. So sorry, I had my chat box closed. This is my first Skype webinar, so bear with me as I kind of fumble around here. Let's see. Do we have humidity data that you know of?
And not with this device.
Yeah.
I don't have humidity.
Okay. So, yeah, that's very good question. Is it waterproof? How many percents of humidity when it's operating? We have developed this up here in the Pacific Northwest, so we've tested it out when it's raining, and it certainly doesn't affect the instrument, unless it's pouring rain. You probably don't want to be out there in there, but it certainly can handle some rain. In regard to percent humidity when it's operating, that's a very good question, and that's a specification that I don't think we have hammered out quite yet, but we certainly have the resources to test that, and I'll be happy to get back to you with that information as soon as we get it. I appreciate that question.
Wendy?
Oh, let's see, yeah. So sometimes the unit hangs during startup with a black screen.
I can actually answer that. This is Susie, Wendy. The reason that we put the blue power button or blue power light on is just for that reason, is that sometimes that is a little computer that's on the instrument, and so it takes a moment as it's starting up before you will see the CID Bioscience logo. However, once you press the power button, as long as you see the blue light, know that the computer is starting up, and shortly, within, I'd say 30 seconds or so, you'll see that CID Bioscience name and then the menu starting to come up.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'll give you a few more minutes here to type your questions if you have any. I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us. If you have any questions that arise after this webinar, I think Susie is going to provide our contact information for both herself, me, as well as my associate, the other application scientist available. His name is Dennis Fisher. So all three of us are available and happy to help you with any questions you have. And it looks like we've got another question about becoming a distributor in Indonesia. That's definitely Susie's realm, and I'm sure she'd be happy to talk to you about that after the webinar, you think, Susie?
Yes. Zita, I will write you some information. We actually do have representation already in Indonesia, but I will write you an email about some possibilities. I've in the chat box, I've put Katrina's email, my email, and I'm about to put in a link that you can use to request a quote if you need a quotation for this instrument.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and excuse myself, but thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful morning, presumably, where you are, evening.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and if you would like us to send you additional information, please type your email address in the chat box, and I just posted the link that you can request a quote. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. We don't need more information from you.
I don't have that chat.
You did a great job. You did a really good job of speaking slowly too. I'm only bummed because I didn't start the recording right when I started talking. I started it when you started talking, but
You know what
that's
we
okay.
really need for that is a way to like show this interface on the computer so that we don't have to be like, here's how you, because it's hard to like
Yeah.
navigate through those screens
Mhm.
while holding it up
Yep.
close.
And, oh, yeah, that's one of the whole things about just in the software.
But you can't do that right now.
Nope, Brian's against it.
Okay. Well, maybe for internal, we've got that whole like, oh, for internal, this is good. So that's like, but it does seem like the webinars are a good direction to be.